again, as previously mentioned, if we have, many of the school events go on, and many of you have children, so if we have to change a date, if you know of one, if you could let Cindy know, and we'll reschedule accordingly.
Are we showing anything coming up as far as January? Any possible applications or anything? There is some things in the works?
Jumped us ahead of the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thing, but sure, let Deirdre just introduce a couple of things.
So there's two
Microphone,
applications.
Deirdre.
Hold on, I'm sorry, Deidre, hold on just one second. So for the zoning board schedule, we're gonna accept it as it is for now. And
I
if
have
there's any-
one
oh,
conflict, if that matters.
Is it just a personal conflict?
Personal
Okay,
conflict. Yeah.
that I don't think is an issue, because we
Okay.
can always cover that. I was more worried about anybody knowing school dates or anything like that. That would affect,
Yeah,
a majority.
okay.
But again, if you do, let Cindy know. And then, okay, Deidre?
Okay, I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that we have two applications that are coming up. The interesting thing about them is that they both have retaining walls built on village property. So we're still kind of working out how to address them, because technically retaining walls are supposed to be a certain setback, a certain height, and there's regulations with that. One of them, I believe, also has a fence that's also on village right of way. Again, there's regulations for that. So currently as it is, those are being addressed with the village attorney, but just FYI, those are also things that might come back, might factor into it. But it's at least two cases right now that should be hopefully on the January meeting, if not the one after that.
Gotcha.
Just to be clear, two cases, one property, or two
Two-
separate properties?
two separate properties.
identical or similar issues?
Well, they have completely other variances that they need to address. This is just in doing a site plan review to make sure we caught every single thing that would need a variance. They all come at once. That's where it was caught that they have retaining walls that just encroached, came on the village property. One of them, they just actually rebuilt it, so it is a whole new full retaining wall that's at least probably like 3 to 4 feet and has a fence. And it did encroach over time. We have some surveys that show how it encroached into village right of way. But they originally came for a pool variance, and then they have a shed variance that came onto it. So it started kind of building, and that's where it got a bit sticky. The other one, I believe theirs might be a hot tub variance. They have a few other variances, and again, it was just caught that theirs is a bit different because their retaining wall is kind of those rock retaining walls, or it's just big boulders, but it's counted as a retaining wall. But again, it's on village property. So
So it looks like January and February we'll have something going on. It looks
hopefully,
like.
yeah. There's a
Hopefully,
few others that are also should be coming on, but those are the two that kind of start dealing with how
Okay.
the village wants to handle them. But they're also being discussed by the Board of Trustees on the procedure.
Thank you.
Just FYI.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Actually, Deidre, before you sit, question for you. 60 North Country Road, I saw that they've been doing some work there. They've had dumpsters there and people working on the building. Do they have anything going on there? Because there's a
Which
few,
building is that?
that's on the corner, right across from Mather Hospital.
Oh, the old
Chase,
cheese building.
used to be Chase was
Yeah.
there, and I don't know what
Okay.
was there now. Dan's shaking his head, so he knows what I'm about to bring up.
It was the sign was the
Yeah.
problem there, and they still have that. But they have it open so you could see through.
Through it, right. There's I don't know if there's something going on there, but there is I don't want to say a violation, but we did deny a variance for them, and they were supposed to remove a sign. To date, that hasn't been done.
The sign is removed, but the
Well, the whole structure.
Structure
We
is
denied
there.
the structure. They removed the individual nameplates.
so you could
But
see
they
through.
moved the nameplates when the tenants vacated.
Right,
Not
right.
Not because they were in violation of what was recommended. by
Correct.
the ZBA, they did it because the property was then vacated, and as each tenant left, they removed their signage.
Correct.
And
Okay.
there is a large sign, brick structure.
Yes.
The monument one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corner, right? Yeah.
Correct, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's also, I believe, on village I believe it's either right up against the village right away, like the property line, because that
It's
property
something to
line
do with the
runs
corner and
irregular
stuff,
around
yeah.
that corner, so.
Yeah, I could check that. I don't believe they have any permits or anything
Okay.
in with the village.
I just
right now.
happened to see a dumpster there a couple of weeks ago, so it looked like they were prepping spaces.
Look at you ratting them right in.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll check in. I'll look into it. I'll see if they filed anything. If not, we'll get someone out there. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments? before we move on to tonight's presentation?
Second last.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, you're right, I apologize. The last item on the agenda is bundled training. Anyone that has to do training, me being one of the people, they're giving, the New York State Planning Federation is giving the opportunity to have the courses emailed to you. I guess you can watch them at your leisure and then apply for your certificate. There's a package, there's a flyer in your package, so take note of that. Anybody's got remaining training to do.
Yeah, I signed up, but I didn't do it yet.
Yes, I have to catch up on my training as well. So,
Did you?
I did, well, it was Tuesday, right?
Was it Tuesday? I know, I ended up in an emergency with one of my.
We don't have a meeting coming up in December.
no, that's what I said. There's
Okay,
no,
yeah, yeah, okay.
usually we don't meet in the
Right,
month of
yeah.
December unless there's a
August, yeah.
pressing application or
Okay.
we're trying to keep up on applications, but in this case, we don't have that.
And we usually skip August, too.
Yeah, again,
We totally neglected it.
Hi.
But I was out having fun.
She was traveling.
all right, that being said, Andy, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I appreciate you giving me the time to make this presentation. Excuse me. Since I've been here, the Department of Building and Planning has been working with Suffolk County to, they actually reached out to us. They wanted to start with the Village of Port Jefferson because I was here and because the Port Jefferson had already started that while I was with the county. So they reached out to us to see if we wanted to complete a interactive live land use map, which is one of the projects that we're working on. In the process, while we were applying for a grant, the grant required that we submit a digitized version of our zoning map, which we learned or knew, staff knew, I didn't know, we don't have a digitized zoning map. So the first thing that we wanted to do was get this map prepared. So I reached back out to Suffolk County and said, hey, can we package the work that we're doing into several products? Next slide, please. So up on the screen is the existing zoning map that is posted by the village for residents and speculators to look at. It's a little primitive, and it is certainly not digitized, and it's not tax map based. You could zoom in on this map and not get much more detail. So we worked with Suffolk County, and we digitized the zoning to be tax map parcel. If you could go to the next slide. And this is now what our zoning map looks like. It is a draft still because we have not gotten your comments or your blessing on the map. We brought this to the planning board. The planning board really had no comments on the map. But you might, in your memory, in your recollection, be looking at two specific areas of this map. The most recent zone change that was done that would have changed this zoning map was up in the MW1 area along the bend. It was properties owned by Northville, and they had requested several administrations ago or a while back, that's correct, right where the line is, for corrections to the zoning. They interpreted the zoning to be one way. We had it mapped a different way. We corrected that. I researched the files, I looked at the tax map numbers, and we corrected the zoning map. So that was one area that needed correction. It went through the trustee process, and the amendment was made. The other amendment is further back, right after the comprehensive plan was adopted, where 88 North Country Road is, where DPW and planning, building and planning is supposed to be located. There was an area of, was it RO? I forget what it was. It was RO. And as a result of the recommendations of the master plan, that large area was rezoned to PO. Okay. So, right down over in there, right. That whole area, including the little triangle in between, was RO. It's now PO. So those were the only two zone changes that have been made in the last decade, probably. So that we don't do too many zone changes. Having said that, the planning board, the board of trustees may be considering a couple of zoning changes moving forward in the next year. But this is our zoning map. What I'm asking the boards to do is to take a look at it. I don't know if you want to zoom in a little bit, Deirdre, on, well, maybe you can't. But the intent is to make this digitized. It is digitized now, and to put it on the website as our official map. And I believe if you zoom in on the digitized version, you can go down to the tax map parcel. So you could see exactly the zoning. Another thing that happened was the county made the zoning lines match the property lines. You might be familiar with the old way as, you'd go, the property has got, I don't know, C1 on the street, but the back end is RO, so it was split. The county worked with the village back in the day to smooth out those zoning lines. Okay, and I think the rule was if your property was more than half one particular zone, then the whole property would be treated as that zone. So, so that's the zoning map. So I'd like you to, take a look at it, scan it, see if anything doesn't sit right with you. We'll investigate it, make sure. I would appreciate at some point, maybe the chair could just say, we've looked at the zoning map. We don't have any concerns at this time. This way, if something comes up in the future, you said at this time. And then we would get that, and then the clerk would be able to sign the map as our official map.
So you're looking for errors in the map?
If you see an error, if you remember, I don't remember this piece being zoned this way, we'll double check it just to make sure. Whatever strikes you when you look at it. Maybe you don't like the colors, maybe we can work on color. I don't know. Whatever it is, these are traditional land use colors, but anything that strikes you, we're happy to consider and look at and validate or
I
whatever.
don't have copies of that.
We'll get you paper copies if you want them. Okay.
Andy, can you, or Deidre, can you actually show us if I was going on the website and I click, you just said if I clicked on a parcel, it'll show me, or tax map, it would show me what the zoning is. Can you-
Right. This isn't interactive, so I can't do it
Oh,
in
okay.
this presentation, but when it goes onto the web,
Okay.
that function should be available.
So what do you mean by they wanted it digitized? So that's what you mean, like an interactive overlay where you can click on parcel, right?
Right.
Like a GIS kind of
Right.
situation.
It is.
Gotcha.
It is GIS based,
Based, right.
and
Okay.
and it's it's
They-
computerized.
they didn't
The other
mean-
map was a picture.
Right.
This
They
is
didn't.
computerized.
They didn't mean just upload a PDF of a
Right.
map. They meant like create something that had a search function, put an address in, or something like that.
The
Now, this
intention-
map is not likely to change unless the village
Right.
board of trustees approves a zone change. Then we would go through the motions of amending the
Update,
map
right.
with the county. The next map.
Yeah.
Next slide, please, Deidre. Okay. This is the land use map. Now, us planners know that there's a difference between zoning and land use. The land use map is a lot more, I'm going to say granulated. I don't like to use that word anymore, but granulated because a lot of the uses within the zones don't match the permitted uses in the zones. So you might have a commercial use in a residential zone. You might have a residential use in a zone that doesn't allow residential. But this map shows that. This map was the map that we started with the county, and the county has a process where anybody can pull a form up off the county website and say tax map parcel 1074 is no longer a gas station. It's now a deli or a fish market or
Convenience
whatever.
store, right.
The county gets that. And depending on if we send it in or somebody, the assessor sends it in, or whoever sends it in, the county will validate that with the village. So it'll go to Susan, and Susan will check with us and validate that, oh yeah, that changed, or no, that's not correct. And then we can tell the county in real time, change the map. So whenever they get to the next cycle of uploading, that piece changes. So this is going to be a real time land use map. Now, why do we do that? In planning, and the zoning board has recently done it in very many planning studies, but in planning, we like to look at data. So if we go to the next slide, go to one more slide. Okay, so we can look at data from our land use. This is zoning, but just to see, it's hard to see there, but
Oh wow.
we can calculate now the percentages of the zones in the county. I'm colorblind here. Somebody can help me here? It looks to me like the RB1, I think that's RB1, is 61% of the village.
I think it's RB2.
Maybe it's RB2.
RB1 is 9%.
I'm sorry, RB2.
Yeah.
The blues are close on this, on the key along the bottom.
Yep.
But the RB2 zone
Hmm.
is our largest zone, and then you can see as we go along what the other zones are by comparison. So the C1 zone, there's 142 parcels in the C1 zone. There's 34 acres, 34.8 acres in the C1 zone. By comparison, then the RB2 zone has 1,695 acres in it. I'm sorry, parcels in it, and 835 acres. So we can come up and start to pull data like this out of it. And why would this be interesting? Well, if we wanted to know how many affordable units we could build in the village, we would want to see how many two-family zones, not use, but zones we have, how many multifamily zones we have, what are the zones that would allow multifamily use. This is important because the village is designated as a pro-housing community, and the state designated us that way because we have a significant number of affordable units and a large amount of zones that would allow affordable type units by design, two-family attached units. Okay, so that is some of the data that we can pull out of the zoning map. We can pull some data out of our existing land use map. Okay, so you could see that from the pie chart there, looks like I want to fix these colors. Medium density residential is the largest part of the pie, followed by high density residential. So medium density residential has got 1,600 parcels in it for 600 acres. High density residential has 800 parcels but for 107 acres. And again, we can look at the commercial, we can look at how much utility area we have, various different, how much surface water we have. From the land use map, we can do all sorts of queries depending on your interest.
One recommendation, if you were going to publish this pie chart, it'd be helpful to match the colors on the pie chart to the actual colors on the land use map as well.
Yep, we'll talk to the county. I think that for the most part, you could see all the red on the map corresponds to the red slice of the pie chart.
But even on the bottom, we have, like with those, low density residential, if you made that the same color as the pie chart, is that what you're referring to?
Right.
That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, so make the chart match the
Okay.
table.
We did the charts, right?
Yeah,
But that can be done. That can be done.
It would be easier, because I'm looking at it, and I did the first thing I did was look down at the table, seeing if I could see if a color core, it'd be quicker to, like, what is orange? Oh, orange is,
Well, RB2, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that could be easily done. The next slide just shows how many village-owned parcels that we might have. I'm sorry, the number of village-owned parcels. We've got town-owned parcels, so we can look at who owns what through this data, and then we can do it by ownership, number of parcels. We can do it. The next slide is acreage of parcels by ownership. I wanted to back up to the
let me ask you a question. Can you combine the one before it with the one now? I mean, what is the difference between the two? If you can go back one, Deidre?
this was just something that we pulled.
Yeah, like you
One
have
was
village.
acreage, one was parcels.
All right.
That's all.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We just went into the data and made some pie charts just
Yep.
to show what could be done.
Oh, okay.
We didn't make an attempt to match colors. We just tried to show you some ideas on
Yep.
what you could do with the type of data that you get out of this.
Perfect.
I have one other quick question.
Sure.
On the land use map, I just happened to notice that there's like paper roads listed as roads on there. Was that an intentional choice?
I don't think it was intentional. When you say paper streets, you mean
Like that they only exist on paper and they're not actually there? Because I know, because I live next to one and I can see on it, it looks like a road, but
and that's on the land use map. Well, paper streets would be mapped. I don't know if they would be named, but if it's a paper
No, I
street,
mean,
it
I
would
don't
probably
see a
come
name
under.
on it, 'cause yeah, they're relatively small.
Okay.
I was just, just curious, that's all.
It's
Again,
probably-
they're just pulling data off the tax maps and off of information, so it's just representing that with some color.
Got it.
So back on the zoning map, can we just go back to that for a quick sec? So will this be capable of also showing us any changes, like historically, like, oh, that used to be, right? Or that used to be, you know?
Well, we would have to create a older map.
Right.
So we could,
Or a
you know,
layer.
click back and forth,
layer,
because the older map is a paper.
Gotcha.
It's not digitized at all.
Or at least going forward, then you can say, oh, well, back at that time, that
Right.
was that, and then,
Right. Right now, I can only show you
Sure, of
the old
course.
paper map,
Right.
the little piece of MW over
Right.
there, and then the new map,
Right.
and that's the area that changed.
Right.
In the future, we could be able to click back and forth
Right.
to show you things like that. Sure.
Andy, is the intention on this map, I know, is the intention that if a resident wants to fill out an application, they can go on the website, theoretically find their parcel of land, because most people don't know what their property is zoned.
Right.
So,
Right.
and one of the questions on the applications is, what is your property zoned?
Right.
So they would be able to go to their property, click on it and say, oh, my property is owned RB1, RA1, or, RB2, whatever.
That is the intent for the public to have knowledge. When I first started in my career, information was siloed in the department or in the agency, and you had to call the agency and beg them for that information. Now we've gone to open data. So basically, all data is available. So if somebody wanted to go to this map and use the data, they would be able to get into the data sets and pull things out. They can't change the map, but they could get the data and do their own analyses. So that's the intent, is to make this open data. Anybody could use this zoning map for their own speculative or planning purposes.
What about, since you're doing all this, is the intent at some point to, how to put this, put the application online? And,
Sure.
because right now all the applications are hand written. And,
click a button and have it pre-populate at
well,
least your
like a PDF
basics.
file you could type on and modify it, Dan, you know more about that than I do, but, because that would be, because one of the things is that, it's always been a thing with me, is that everyone that feels like they come in front of us needs to hire an expediter. Not trying to put any of the expediters out of business in the village, but, the people are intimidated by coming into the board, for things like a shed, a pool, which, could be easily resolved, and, having to fill out a big application and at least giving them everything online instead of having coming down to the village to get a copy of the application.
No, that point is well taken, and we would like to have the ability to do that and be able to have applicants fill out forms online and be able to click resources.
Right.
That's going to take some doing, but that would be the goal.
So being that, this is really interesting, because being that we are going to parcelize our map, right? Right, because we're using the same GIS maps that Suffolk has, right? We can get down to a parcel level. Will we be able to access our tax bills through that, like you would in a Brookhaven, like you would in a town of Huntington? You click on it.
Data is all about
Yeah.
layers.
Right.
Right. So if you go to Suffolk County GIS, if you go
Right.
to Town of Brookhaven GIS, you can click on those
Yep.
parcels and get information.
Brookhaven just updated theirs this past week. The village, yeah. The village is only available by line item, not by map.
Yeah,
identity.
sure.
So we would like to,
So this
work
opens the
towards
door.
that.
So this opens the door, because this is the foundation for us to parcelize our map for the village, right?
Yes.
I mean, yeah,
This,
so
this
now
would be the first step.
this
And-
would be the very first step.
right.
And
we
then-
don't have the data, but the county has the data, so we would work with the
And
county.
Andy, on that, are we gonna be the same format as the county and Brookhaven? Because it would seem logical in my mind, not, we do it one way, the county does it another, which usually how government does it, everybody does it their own way instead of all doing it the same way, and then, making it, and then eventually layering everything on top of each other.
Right.
So
Well, I'm
we-
not going to speak for
But are
the
we
town of
following-
Brookhaven, but our initiative, the village's initiative, is with the county.
Okay,
So we'll be matched with the county.
okay.
We had one other map product that we wanted to pull out of this initiative that we're working with the county on. And Deirdre, if you could go to the one. Yes, the municipally owned map. We had a need to show the municipal owned parcels in the village. And one of the graphics, one of the pie charts just showed how it's all broken down. Let's see if I could just talk about
Teacher,
this again.
can you zoom in on the municipal owned parcels, the side? Because I can't really read.
Would have to, I can exit out of the PowerPoint
Okay,
the PDF.
yeah, okay, fine. I'm just saying it's hard to read it from here.
Yeah.
Village parks, beach properties.
Yeah, I'm just,
Portion of roads.
right. Because when you say municipal owned properties, are you saying like PSE and G, which technically is a, well,
No, that would
No,
be
these are
a,
Port Jefferson Village only.
right.
okay.
So there are three categories: village owned, town owned, and county owned on this map.
Okay,
So there's, I think that's 80. I'm not sure if that's parcels or acres. No, that must be parcels. So there's 83 parcels.
yeah, it's 83 according to
83
your previous
parcels.
table, yeah.
Right.
Land underwater.
You
Yes,
do?
there's
Yeah.
actually privately owned land that
Yeah.
is underwater. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Riparian rights.
Yeah. So there's 3 town-owned parcels, and believe it or not, there's 11 county-owned parcels. And in terms of acreage, the village owns 234 acres throughout the entire village, and the town owns 2.3 acres, and the county 1.7 acres. So the parcels that are owned by the county are very tiny pieces.
And Andy, who owns the Port Jeff Harbor Bay Bottom? Is that Brookhaven or is that the
That would
village?
be the town of Brookhaven.
That does, okay, that does. I know they own the Bay Bottom and a few other places.
I think within 1,500 feet, I'll double check my harbor management plan, but I think 1,500 feet from the shore is still regulated by the village, and then beyond 1,500 feet is the town.
Down, right,
But we
okay.
have a harbor management plan, so if
Yep.
you're dropping a mooring, you got to go to the town anyway.
Right, yep.
So that really was just what I wanted to show you about some of the products that we were working on for a while and got pulled off, but we'll be getting back to this again. And this is kind of a bread and butter
They
kind of thing
regulate
that we'll be
first,
working on
you
when we
know,
have the time
they
to
don't
work
own
on it.
Regulate.
So I would like the board to look at it, send me questions, send me comments, and maybe at the next meeting, we could go through them if I can get answers for you, and hopefully you could say, this is great, post it, adopt. Really, the zoning map is the one I'm most interested in, because I need to get the official
Yeah,
zoning map
yeah.
on the website.
Andy, question for you on this map.
Yes.
Yellow, it looks like it's village parks. Am I right in reading that? That top line is yellow, whatever, yellow, green, whatever.
Let me look at the printout, see if that's
Yeah, where you,
more helpful.
is that village parks? Are all the properties owned by the village or are they all village parks, designated parkland? Like
No,
how-
not all the properties are designated village parks.
Stop, real estate agents and Melissa, stop.
She had a whole meeting about it. And
Stop.
So no, not all the village property are parks. Some of them are municipal. On where is
Are they showing?
There are 5 active parks, correct?
200 people came.
I don't have that information here, but I think that is correct.
Right. But I guess my point is that on this map, do you just show the municipal, because you said it's village parks, but are there other ways there? Like, I know in the town, there's parkland, there's open space, there's different designations for property. Do you just show all the village-owned property as village-owned parks?
No, we have village land, recharge basins, beach properties, vacant land, land underwater, village facilities, other facilities that
Okay.
are non-village,
Village
village,
park-
So you have different-
parking lots.
So those,
yeah.
those are different classifications.
Those are all
of-
different categories of that
question.
land.
So those 83 parcels that you mentioned earlier, 86, are all different classifications, whatever those
Right.
classifications are on the right-hand side.
That's correct.
Unknown.
So if there is something you're curious about, if there's something the ZBA thinks is important for your decisions, let me know. We'll try and get you that information.
Andy, when do you want an answer on this?
Um,
So it was next
January?
meeting. I was gonna say next meeting takes us into January.
Yes.
Okay.
How about that?
Is that something we need to make a motion on the record? Or is
No,
that how
I-
you want? Okay. You just,
No, I don't think you need a
Okay.
resolution or anything like that. I just need something to show the clerk that you guys have looked at it,
Right.
and at this time you have no comments.
If you do have any questions, I would ask that you send them to Cindy and you copy me on it, and then Cindy will officially make sure it gets to either Deidre or Andy. They'll either respond, hopefully we'll respond, and then we'll go from there. This way we can have a formal record of it.
Yeah, because you need this to move forward. with this,
I,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
the clerk had told me she'd be most comfortable
Yeah, I understand.
if the boards would put
Of
something in
course,
writing
of
that they
course.
looked at.
And then what we'll do is we'll open the January meeting. This will be the first item on the January meeting. Hopefully by then, Andy, you'll have any questions and you'll be able to answer any of those questions that were submitted
Mhm.
by the board.
Hmm.
Are you opening this up to public comment, Andy?
Not at this time.
Right. There's no reason to, I mean, there's no,
Yeah.
you're providing existing information, you're not
Right.
making any changes or anything.
And
I
this-
made a presentation to the Board of Trustees. They had a couple of comments. The public has seen it. This is live streamed. The public will be aware. Once we adopt it, I'm sure we will make an announcement via our social media outlets that we have digitized products, not just the zoning map.
But we're not going
land
through
use.
the whole public comment, we're not opening it up for public comment, but not that there, again.
I think that,
We're publishing existing information.
I would defer to the village attorney and the village board, but that's really up to them how they want to go through the
Okay.
process of adopting.
And there's no test environment that we can view before we give you our, decision about, yes, it's accurate, or yes, we agree. There's no test environment of us clicking on the parcels yet or anything like that. that we-
No, not really.
you
No,
like
you
a
can zoom, you
limited-
can zoom in, but it's not,
Right,
it's not interactive at this time.
Okay.
And Cindy, you emailed everyone this presentation, right? I saw that in my email.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. So everyone has this, so if you could look at it, and again, we'll send the questions directly to Cindy, copy me on them, and then Cindy, you'll disseminate the information either to Deidre or Andy, depending on what's appropriate. Okay.
And I think it's helpful, I think we're used to using these tools and, whatever little wrinkles or stuff we blend right over because we're so used to them. So, but for people who are not used to seeing these things, your first impressions, any comments that you would have, love to have those things. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so that's it for this presentation.
All right, Andy, before we just, one last question on this presentation. For you to move forward, after we have the next meeting, you would just want an email from me with the board all copied saying that we approve the map as is or approve the map with the changes to, however we get. So you're just looking for an email.
Just an email.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, excellent. Thank you.
Sure. So we're just going to bring up the other presentation.
We could submit that to you sooner. We don't have to wait till next meeting, right?
No,
okay.
I'm just,
I'll take them when you got them. It's
Yeah.
just you want to coordinate.
yeah,
with
submit
each
all
other.
your questions at any time you want,
Okay.
and if,
we should.
if no one has any questions at some point, we might just say, since no one has any
Right, I
questions, we
think
can
we
move
should.
forward with this.
Since we have nothing on. Just-
So the last products were, based on the zoning map. The zoning board of appeals really just wants to know what is the zone, generally speaking, not to diminish anything. And there might be some data that you want to pull out of zoning and land use to help you understand matters before you. What I'm going to talk about next is going to be very topical for the zoning board of appeals. You may know that we have a parking issue in the village. You may know
I
that
heard something about that.
since I've come in,
I
just
read
about
something.
every project, with the exception of quite a few, needs a parking forgiveness. I'll call it forgiveness. Applicants, up until I got here, had basically understood there was one way to get parking forgiveness, and that was to pay through the PILOP, payment in lieu of parking. A single parking space shortfall in the C2 district Upper Port or South Village is $4,000 a spot for your shortfall. In the C1 downtown, it's $6,500 a spot. So it's not intended to be a revenue generator, but if every project comes in the village with a shortfall in parking, it will generate significant amount of money, and some projects may not be able to get there. But every project just about is coming in short of parking. So recently, the village attorney said, well, that's not the only avenue for an applicant to get relief from the parking requirement. They can go to the ZBA and get a variance on the required parking. I don't think that's happened here.
Oh,
often.
It has.
It
has.
has, yeah.
Okay,
In my tenure,
It-
we've issued
okay.
variance.
So in my experience at the county, we'll get to a slide in a second. My experience in the county, Well, let's go through this and I'll get back to that. So this is a presentation on something that I worked on with the county. It's called parking stall demand reduction. While I was with the county adopted a model ordinance for parking stall demand reduction. Next slide, please. Okay, so we developed, in the county, we developed a model code for parking stall demand reduction, PSDR. And basically what we're trying to do is to treat the cause, not the symptom. If you have too many cars in an area that you can't park, the cause is you have too many cars. So you want to stop cars from being in the downtown, in the commercial business districts, uptown, downtown. So you want to reduce the amount of cars that need to be parked in the two commercial business districts. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. How do we reduce the number of cars? Next slide. This is just some background on the village. If anybody in the audience is curious, the village is 50 miles east of New York City. There's 3 square miles. It's a 3 square mile village with about 1.5 miles of shoreline. Our population is roughly 7,500 people with approximately 3,000 households. This is from the last census. 70% of the households are home ownership and 30% are rentals. Perception might be maybe that's back the other way around, but 70% of the homes in the village are owned. Port Jefferson Village's median age is 45.6, which is a little older than a lot of other communities. Port Jefferson Village's median household income is about $121,000, which is a little bit higher than some communities. And most visitors come either by auto, bus, train, or ferry. How else are you going to get to the village? Few people come in by medevac, but we. So when I was with the county, General Municipal Law 239 L, M, and N just gave authority to the county to accept and required municipalities to forward applications. So under certain circumstances, an application in the village of Port Jefferson would have been referred to my office in the county and the County Planning Commission for review. Variances were included in that. So any variances that were within 500 feet of a roadway, within a mile of an airport, et cetera, would have been referred to my office. Ted Klein did those reviews, and we would see from 10 towns and 33 villages, parking variance, parking variance, parking variance, parking variance. And we would look and see that there is no nexus for these village boards to forgive the parking. The applicant would come in and say, my business model doesn't need all the parking, it would get forgiven. Or I can't find anywhere to put the parking, and because the board might have been sympathetic, they'd waive the parking. But nothing went to, all right, we're waiving the parking, but where are you going to put all those cars that we're waiving the spaces for? Okay, so the county executive, when I was at the county, had this concept called Connect Long Island, where he wanted to turn train stations into intermodal hubs and take advantage of walkability, take advantage of the fact that intuitively we think that you don't need a car if you live in an intermodal district. Okay, we don't always see that. But anyway, this was Connect Long Island. When County Executive Balone was here, he wanted to electrify the 3 lines. He wanted to build all these places, if you will. And Port Jefferson, even though it's not one of the bubbles, was one of the locations at the end of the yellow line on the North Shore there, where electrification is supposed to come to Port Jefferson, making the TOD, the transit-oriented development around Port Jefferson Station, extremely valuable in terms of the new age of housing, if you will. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, there's an intuitive connection between constructing in a transit-oriented district around a train station and a reduction in the needed parking stalls. We think that because millennials, and if we're still talking about millennials or Generation X, they're coming out of school in debt. And they want walkable land use options in a transit-oriented development. So they don't want to own a car. They don't want to pay for the insurance. They don't want to pay for the maintenance. They've got high college debt that they're coming out of, so it's almost a necessity that they don't have a car. So they tend to gravitate to these walkable communities. Port Jefferson in the South Village, the C2 district, is a ideal transit-oriented district. And we're starting to turn it into a high-density, affordable area. Okay, next slide. All right, but TODs, even though intuitively we think that the millennials and Generation X, they're in debt, they don't want cars. Intuitively, we think that they won't have them, but we still find that TODs remain congested. We still have people circling parking lots looking for a parking space.
Any millennial that does not have a car.
Really?
On Long Island, you have to have a car. Because if you want to get out of Port Jeff where there is no grocery store, you need a car to go to Setauket. You need a car to go uptown.
Let me introduce you
car
to my
anyway.
daughter, who does not own a car, who lived in Queens.
Queens, I can
Okay.
see you not on
In
it.
Suffolk County, you
But
might
we
be
don't
right.
want this
We may need
place.
a car, but do we need 2 cars? Do we need 3 cars? How
Yeah,
many
because
cars do
one
we
for
need?
one for each person in the family if they're working. My daughter works in Riverhead. Her husband works in Setauket. They live in Miller Place. They have to drive, Mount Sinai, rather, they have to drive. If you want to get anywhere on Long Island, you don't have trains going north-south, so you can't get to the South Shore. I think everything you said is crazy.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I mean, in a utopian world, that might work, and when we can have little George Jetson spaceships. But right now, you can't. That is so far from the truth. I hear all the late 20s and 30-year-olds complaining, why are they building all these apartments? Why don't they build affordable houses? We want houses, not apartments.
That's interesting. And sure, we want a diversity of housing stock, but I could probably, for every millennial that you bring, or Generation X that says, I want to live with 3 cars, are they living in a TOD? And I could bring you a millennial Generation Xer that says, I
My
don't
dad
want a
from
car.
Queens.
I don't want a car.
Queens are used to it, but people who grow up out here, to live on Long Island, honestly, you need a car, do you not? And each family, each person who works or has to get someplace needs a car.
Okay. I think that is a valid point. I think that there's a lot of data out there that we could have a very good
With
discussion
white-collar
about.
Glasses who want to build, builders who want to build multiple, like the apartments and all that.
Mhm.
They all say, yeah, we don't need it. They're also living in Belterre, they're living in places and they all have their cars. That is not, if you go around to most, say, 30-year-olds, I don't believe that what you're saying is true
Well-
unless you've grown up that way.
And I'm certainly not here to debate you. I think
No,
that
I'm
is
not.
that's a
Just
valid
saying,
concern.
that's the weirdest thing I just
I
heard.
give you Wine Dance Rising. I give you Ronkonkoma Hub. I give you the town of Riverhead now that is blossoming like a mushroom because they are expecting the electric rail to come in and bring people by foot, not by car. So in Suffolk County, you're right. You need a car to get from point A to point B. Maybe you have kids who are car age that need a car to get from point A to point B. But if you live in an intermodal district, the presumption is that you're looking to walk. Once you get home from work, you're looking to walk for dinner. You're looking to walk to pick up some groceries. You're looking to walk to get a service, a haircut, or your dry cleaning. You don't necessarily want to get into a car.
It's true, you want to take a walk, it's nice. My daughter lived for a while in Bay Shore and she could walk, go to dinner. But then she had to get to work. She wanted to go to other places besides Bay
Yeah,
Shore.
I'm not saying that
She had-
we're
she needed a
eliminating,
car.
we're not eliminating motor vehicles at all.
Yeah.
We're just trying to incentivize people not to have more than 1 car or 2 cars in a downtown intermodal district because we want the visitors and the people to come in to buy things to have a place to park. Residents generally have a place to park. It's the visitors and the people who come in to bring commerce into a commercial business district that are having a hard time finding parking. So how do we do that? How do we do that? Let's see how we could do that. But what we are finding, and you might be right, TODs remain congested. Even though we're building attached units and they're walkable to a train station, we still can't find the parking. Why is that? It's because people are coming with their 2 and 3 cars and filling up all the parking spaces.
But
So
also residents complain like downtown, nobody goes to Port Jeff. Residents don't generally go to Port Jeff in the summer because they can't find parking. So they get all aggravated and they're the ones complaining, there's no parking because there's all people from out of town coming in. But anyway, go ahead.
okay. Next slide. No, and we do notice that notwithstanding the millennials, and this is well documented that they have debt and they don't want cars and they don't want this and they don't want that. Notwithstanding that, the amount of cars that are registered in New York goes up every year. So even though we have this cohort that doesn't want cars, according to me, and according to some of the data that I read, car ownership in New York State is still going up. So what's the cost of building parking construction? Some of these figures are a little old. They're going to be more than what you see here now. But a typical parking lot space costs about $4,500 to construct. Then you have to maintain it, so that's about $225 a month to cover the expenses of maintaining or fixing a pothole or whatever you might have to do for the parking. Parking garages is probably $20,000 to $24,000 a space to construct above ground, and probably $34,000 a space to construct below ground. And again, these figures are only going up. All right. 1 to 2 spaces per residential unit adds an additional cost of about 6 to 16% to every rent or every mortgage that you have because of the cost of maintaining the parking. Next slide. So what we did in the county was we knew that there were ways to decrease the demand for parking, and we didn't invent it. We looked at parking management. And parking management, I kind of equate parking management to sanitary treatment. Okay. Sanitary treatment requires 3 stages. The first stage is collection of the solids. The second stage is polishing off through bacteria and other things, the microbes. The third stage is then getting the chemicals in to take care of everything that the microbes don't do or create, like nitrogen, phosphorus, other things. So it's kind of 3-stage. Parking management is pretty much 3 stages as well. You want to count all your parking spaces to figure out, do we have enough for the demand? Then you want to redistribute your parking spaces so your employees are not parking in the prime spots where your merchants want to go. You want to prioritize where residents can park so they're not fighting customers when they want to park. And so there are all these ways to do that. Some of them are, like shared parking. If I have a use that has a parking demand in the daytime, like an office, but at night nobody's in the office, why can't we use that parking lot for the residential components that are around it? So shared parking is one way to reduce the parking demand on the residents. We're going to build 150 units, but in the evening when my people come home from work, they're going to park at that office parking lot. So I don't need the other 150 parking spaces. I'm going to take credit for that through shared parking. So shared parking is a way to decrease parking demand. So if we can get a lot more shared parking in the village, we could decrease the demand for places to park. Okay, so let's just take that a little bit further. Okay, so there are all sorts of parking demand techniques that we could use to reduce the demand for parking every time we get a project. We can unbundle the cost of parking. I'm going to put that aside because we do that in the village and it's not working because people have other places to park. So let's put that aside for a second. But rideshare programs decrease, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 6 of you, right? 5 of you, sorry. 5 of you, and let's say you rideshare to work tomorrow. So now that's 1, 2, 3, 4 parking spaces we don't need. So ride sharing decreases the demand for parking. So if I have a business and I require my employees to come in by van, we're going to meet you all up at the park and ride on 347, for example. I'm going to bring you in by van. They can decrease their parking demand. They have a shortfall of 8 spaces. Well, my employees are going to come in by a van. Will you give me the variance for the 8 spaces? So we might be able to do that. Okay. Pre-tax community benefit program. We live in the TOD uptown. If a business says I'm going to create with however they do it, sometimes it's available through the federal government, sometimes it's available through the state. If I give you, if you buy 10 train tickets, for example, you can get them off you can buy them pre-tax, okay? There are things you could do. I'm an employer. If you come to work and give me, 3 transit passes, we can give you a bonus, or we can give you a rebate, or we can give you something. So there are things that you could do to incentivize people not to bring cars in. Compressed work weeks. If I work Monday to Thursday, on Friday, I don't need to park. If I work Monday and Tuesday, take off Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, I'm working. Now on Wednesdays, I don't need to park. So you can create parking spaces through compressed work weeks. Believe it or not, you can decrease the amount of parking if people ride their bikes to work. Or they only need 1 car and 1 bike because the other errands that I'm going to do with my bike. Okay, so you can do that too. I'm not saying that all of these are appropriate for every project, but some of these could be. All right, and then preferred parking for HOVs. If I'm going to HOV, I'm going to let you park right by the building. If you're going to come by yourself, you're going to park in the back field. I'm sorry, on a rainy day, you're going to need your umbrella while these guys can just dart right into the building. So there are incentives that you can do. Next slide, please.
Listen, the ferry stops running at 10:30. You got 125 cars you can put on there in the middle of the night. And the first 1,500 feet is village operated.
Well, we want to see if we can manage the parking before we build more parking, right?
Fill the ferry up.
Okay, so this is just locational criteria for a TOD, and you're going to see that for the most part, Upper Port or the South Village provides a lot of this. In its day, it was a central business district. It's kind of decreased or lost its value. It's got some shopping. There are community facilities. We want multimodal public transportation, which is the train, which is the bus network that runs through, which is used to be taxi, now it's Uber or Lyft or any one of the ride shares. But ideal TOD for high density housing and the type of things that we're talking about needs to have public water and public sewer. The zoning needs to be in place. And coming back to the village after being away for almost 30 years, I'm happy that the village went through visioning. The village went through all their charrettes. The village adopted a comprehensive master plan. The planning department and the board of trustees adopted the zoning categories that were in the master plan. So now the C1 district and the C2 district is set up for mixed use housing where you can have commercial on the bottom and residential uses above. All that's in place now in the C2 district. Next slide, Deirdre. Okay. What's the value to a developer for a parking space? Every 2.5 parking spaces and a little bit of that right of way can equate to a 2-bedroom unit. So now a developer says, oh, I don't need all this parking. I can eliminate some of my parking. Will you give me a floor area bonus then over that parking I don't need? Okay, so developers look at parking as wasteland. What they would rather have is additional units. The more units they build on a location, theoretically, economies of scale, they can make those units cheaper. So if we can eliminate the parking that they're using and allow them to build on a certain portion of that, they may be able to build affordable units by design. This is 900 square feet. So 900 square feet can give you a 900 square foot apartment. I would have to talk to Deirdre and see if we've got the habitable space and all that in there. But theoretically, you could get a 1 or 2 bedroom unit out of 2.5 parking spaces. Next slide.
Right?
So when I was with the county, we wanted to codify the builder's public benefits of reduced parking stalls for project-specific initiatives. So what can we do? If they reduce their parking demand, we could increase their floor area. If they decrease their parking demand, maybe we can increase their height. If they decrease the parking demand, maybe we can give them other types of bonuses through the parking stall demand reduction schedule. So maybe you could see where I'm going with this.
But if you did that, but the people still need a car, so where are they putting their cars?
Because they don't need 2 cars. So let's go back
But
to
the
unbundle.
normal
Let's go back to
family They're
unbundle.
gonna have 2 people who are working. On Long Island, that's just a fact. Both husband and wife work. That's 2 cars. And ride sharing, if you're going this way, you might not know, but they tried ride sharing a while ago.
It's not going to work.
The idea is the hope that it's the development creates jobs that are within the immediate walkable district. So if there is this development that happens, that this 2-bedroom apartment that can be yielded, they'll only require 1 car, not 2 car, because one of those parties will be working with a law office or a
Bakery or whatever.
whatever within immediate walking district and distance, and they will then not require the car because everything that they will need will be within a 2-block radius.
15-minute cities. 15-minute cities. 15-minute cities.
Apartments to the train station. If you're a couple and you live in one of those apartments, you only need 1 car, right? Because if I'm taking the train into the city every
True.
day, then you can share a car on the weekends when we need to go places. So I think that's why it's centered around these transportation
But what happens
hubs.
if you want, How often, do you go every place you go on the weekend with your wife? Do you take one car? Or is she going with one place and you're going another place?
Do you live?
My husband and I are
But
all
it's
over.
choice of lifestyle, right? It's choice. I've put quite a few people in apartments in this area based on what I do outside of this. And they are one-family households. Most of them are not from here in this immediate area. They have come from other places. They like the fact that some of those apartments, they get on the train, they go one stop, they're at Stony Brook University, they're going to work, they're doing their thing, they're getting on the train, they're coming back home. They're in those units. They are one car.
So it works if
households.
if you work at Stony Brook.
Well, the idea is
University,
maybe
if you
with
get
some
off
of
and you
these
work at-
developments and the train, this is for future planning. It's not for what's in existence right now. It's the idea of potential planning going forward, I'm presuming. And what could be presented to us
So they
in
want to
front
make
of the board.
Long Island Queens, so everybody can walk in that.
Well, I don't
Doesn't
think
make
that
any
they're
sense.
saying that, but what I think Andy's trying to do is give us alternatives for when these items come before us at the board to pay attention to, that there are alternatives than just saying, okay, give us $6,000 for your parking space that you're not gonna have. What are we asking these developers to do to create incentives on their end to lessen the density of the vehicle?
But I don't see that saying, okay, we'll build more apartments and they won't, and just don't have any parking and have more
Well,
apartments.
that might not be the
Incentive.
bonus that you look at. There are 22 different methodologies that a developer could apply to his project, and all of them have through literature. I probably should have said this in the beginning. When we started this theory, we went through the literature to see which parking management methodology had what kind of reduction in the parking demand. So in the literature, you could look, and I'll just look at this one, rideshare program. There's a 7% in the literature. There's a 7% reduction in parking demand if you just create a rideshare program.
So this is a method for developers to select a way to bring their plans and variances to boards to give them a scientific way to approve their.
That's right. It gives the zoning board of appeals a nexus and creates something.
It sounds good, but I just don't see it.
But
Tracy,
And the building's approved. Now there's 4,000 cars driving around it,
Looking for parking.
looking for parking.
And one day,
Right.
we'll have
That's what-
businesses that everybody is gonna work within 2 minutes of where they live. It doesn't make any
That's not
sense.
necessary. If it's near a train station, you don't have to work 2 minutes from where you live. You need to live 2 minutes from the train station, and then you can go.
To another train station.
you can go
But-
anywhere.
But you're on, yeah, but let's say you work in Bay Shore, unless you, I've never taken a bus on Long Island in all the years I've lived here, but unless you maybe increase the busing and people can get, unless you live on that route, what are you doing? And unless you
that's-
live within walking.
This is
distance
where
of
it's
the
going.
bus.
But this is for the people that do live within walking distance from a bus stop or do live within walking distance from a
I've
train
never taken a
station.
bus.
No,
Oh my
but
God.
again, I also,
I see the buses go
I
by,
also
2
work
people
and
in there.
live within a mile. within
I used to
a-
take S61 to the Smith Haven Mall all the time. With my friend. Shit.
When you're not killing turtles.
We'll just apply more to the planning board and the zoning board.
Parkland.
These things be sorted out by the planning board saying, hey, if you want
This is a
to
way
add this many units and this kind of density, you need to do
Take
these
something
kinds
that's
of
not
things.
So right,
How we come-
so right now there is no authority to do this at all.
Old.
There is
And they
no
get-
authority. What I need to do is get support,
Came up with this
bring this
plan.
back to the Board of Trustees and write a code amendment that gives either the planning board or the zoning board or both the ability to use parking stall demand reduction. So I just like to go through this.
Guys, let Andy finish.
I just wanted to go through it and give you the whole thing because we did email to you the whole enchilada in this report. And hopefully the report is a little bit clearer than what I'm doing. But we wanted to take a real life example and see if a board had the authority to use parking stall demand reduction, what could they do? So we went out there and we found what I call the Frankenstein of all projects. Okay, this project it was a mixed use project. It had 46,000 square feet of retail on the ground floor. It had 18,000 square feet of office. This was as proposed, and it had 291 units, or 339,000 and change of residential square footage. Okay, the parking requirement for that by code was 2,262 parking spaces. There was no way this project would be built. Okay. That was by the code of the municipality. When we looked at ITE, say, well, maybe the code's a little bit draconian. Maybe it's
Right.
it's different
Right,
with some new
828.
multipliers. We came out to 828 parking spaces. The applicant proposed 500 parking spaces from get-go. How do you give them a variance for the difference? Okay. Next. We went to our 22 different congestion management, parking management methodologies. And we said from the literature, if you unbundle the parking cost, and that is, let me just tell you what unbundling is if you don't know. Your rent is $1,000. For every parking space you want in my garage below you, you have to pay $250. So now your rent is $1,500 or $1,000 or $1,200. You pick. So for some people, they're going to say, well, we're walking to the train. There's a bus right there. You got the groceries, you got the hair cutter, you got the laundry. What more do you need? I don't need 2 cars. I'm going to save myself $250 a month. Okay. We're trying that. Some of the projects here are trying that already, except that when they charge that money, the second car goes out into the parking lots where they can park for free or they're not getting ticketed. So unbundling isn't working yet because we're not enforcing it. But once we get into that MTA lot and we say that's a resident, not a commuter, he's going to get ticketed, or she is going to get ticketed. So unbundling the cost of parking only works if you have nowhere else to park the extra car. Right now, we've got extra spaces in the wintertime, in the off season, late at night. There's places you can park if you're a resident overnight. So unbundling the cost of parking isn't really working here yet, but once we get on top of it, it will.
And you're seeing that in the shipyard and,
Right. You've seen that shipyard and station crossings.
yeah, because what's happening is instead of paying for the parking, they're getting the town of Brookhaven sticker, and they're parking either there or the village sticker and parking overnight.
Right.
You know,
Right.
walking into their apartment across the street.
So if you're a resident and you're parking in a resident lot, that's
They
fine.
didn't have enough parking, so that they were gonna take up the parking spaces around the town.
Mm-hmm.
We all said that. Actually, at this table, we all said that's exactly what they're gonna do.
But they have enough parking. They were just charging for it and forcing the parking that would have been in the garage outside.
Well, the extra cars, remember they were parking in that little lot that was
Yep.
supposed to be Port Jeffs, and then they were parking across the street.
So anyway, to finish this then, every one of these parking congestion management techniques has in the literature a reduction percentage. So we went through, we multiplied it out, how many stalls would we reduce, and lo and behold, we reduced 2,100 spaces just by using this. Now this is the Frankenstein of projects, and this is the ultimate use of parking stall demand reduction, but we brought it down by 80%. They offered 500 parking stalls. We brought it down. If we had the authority to require this in the project, we brought it down to 534 stalls. Seems to me that if under this scenario, a zoning board would be confident in granting a variance for 34 spaces.
Denied.
If you got all these other mechanisms. So maybe not.
But all the spots are 5 inches shorter than code, so then they start to stick them all in there.
So how do you incentivize the builders? If we go to the next slide, maybe we don't incentivize them at all. Maybe we just require them to do parking stall demand reduction. But if it's not a requirement, you want to incentivize it, what can you do? You can give them an FAR bonus. Right? So you could give them an FAR bonus. You could give them a height bonus. But you could do something to incentivize them to implement some of these parking congestion management tools. Okay, next slide. So this is the same project when we implemented the parking stall demand reduction. How did that look? Well, we added some lockers. We gave them a floor area bonus on the west side of their building. They have a marquee. Something very interesting that Suffolk Community College does is as you go into the student center, they have this big board, big marquee board. It's a motion message type of board. It's got next bus, 437, S24,
Like Grand Central
S53.
State, like a Penn State, right?
A big board up there. It's got the bus. It's got the next train. It's got the Uber numbers. It's got whatever you need on that board. Just putting that there as you come down the stairs, as you go into the elevator, gobsmacked in the face, that reduces the number of parking spaces because people say, oh, I could just get on the train or I could just hop on the bus. It's coming in 2 minutes. I can just run right onto the bus. So it's working really well at Suffolk Community College, and we have other examples of where it works. So just putting up a marquee in the lobby, putting lockers for bicycles, putting showers in the building, metering parking along the street, giving public parking where public parking is convenient, but then saving spaces for your high HOV spaces. The shared parking with the buildings next door gives you another reduction. And you can design your sites. Cross-access easement gives you that shared parking between the two uses. You can redesign the building, and I don't know, Deirdre, if you want to click back.
What shower facilities?
Right there, the original footprint didn't change except for that little bit of FAR on the left. The parking didn't really change much.
Riding your bike in the summer and you get to work, you're not gonna.
You need a shower.
You're gonna want a shower. And if you don't have a shower, you might not ride your bike. But if you do have a shower when you get to work, you might ride your bike. Vice versa. If you're gonna ride your bike home, I'm gonna just shower right here and then go up to my place nice and clean. Why do I need to go upstairs and shower? Okay, so this is what? Okay, so went back to here now. So where is this being implemented? Well, when we did this, and this was adopted in 2020, when we did this, I think it's easier for me to read from here. Okay. Austin, Texas, where my daughter lives, is they have an incentive to encourage employers or customers to use alternate transportation modes from private automobiles. So Austin, Texas is doing this. Arlington, Virginia has got a transportation demand management for site planning program, which requires the coordination of design and implementation of large projects with commuter transit and infrastructure and services. Seattle, Washington is doing it. They have no parking requirement in Seattle, Washington. Every project that comes in, no parking requirement. But developers are to offer new tenants a suite of parking stall demand reduction techniques. I'm building a building. I have no parking requirement, but everybody that comes in, you got to pick one of these parking stall demand reduction for your business, and we put that in your lease. So carpooling, for example, maybe. New York City requires that entities with 20 or more full-time employees offer qualified commuter benefits to employees, tax-deferred commuter charges, transit passes, bus passes. So New York City requires that 20% or more of their full-time employees have some sort of parking stall demand reduction technique. Winthrop University Hospital in Mineola has a guaranteed ride home for people who carpool and has a pre-tax transit benefit program. So they're doing this in Mineola. In Broadbridge Financial Solutions Incorporated is a company in Edgewood. They're encouraging their employees to use New Ride, which is an incentive-based carpool service at the time. HIA Long Island and East Northport, they have a 5-on-1 rideshare program. Employees who participate receive tax-free dollars. They receive 20% towards their shares in tax-free dollars. Let's see. Widex is a corporation. They have 511 New York Rideshare. They provide vans to the employees to take to and from work. Farmingdale State College. In 2016, students, employees, and visitors are offered free shuttles, which loops from the Farmingdale Long Island Railroad Station through town into the college. Geico, since parking has become an issue in Woodbury, the employees are able to register for their carpool, and by registering, it earns them a parking spot next to the building. So if you register your car, Mr. Chairman, as a carpool vehicle, you get to park next to the building, and your riders get to hop out right next to the building. Next slide. At UC Berkeley, 40% of the employees at businesses that offer car sharing memberships report reducing car ownership, either by selling or not buying a car. Okay? Those employees, as a result, take more public transit and bike and walk more often. So if we incentivize people to give up a vehicle, some of them will do that. 18% converted from solo driving to transit driving when they were offered pre-tax benefits, according to the Transit Center Business Week. Okay, and the Transit Center 2010 Community Benefit Impact Study reported that companies that offer transit benefits have more than twice as many single occupancy vehicle commuters as companies that do not offer the benefit. Oh, non-single occupancy vehicles. Okay. So they have twice as many non-single occupancy vehicles than companies that don't offer that. Okay. There should be one more slide. Oh.
Interesting.
Okay, so I can tell you that when I was with the county, we went out stumping around to municipalities to see if they would adopt our model code. I'm happy to say that the town of Babylon and the incorporated village of, I'm sorry, Amityville. That's right. Amityville. I didn't see it up there. I was confused myself. The village of Amityville and the town of Babylon adopted sections in their code that require developers to consider parking stall demand reduction. So we got half a loaf. They didn't adopt the model code and they didn't adopt our multipliers, but they adopted the concept that perhaps parking stall demand reduction can reduce parking demand. And that's in their code. Is there another slide? And this is what I would suggest in the Incorporated Village of Port Jefferson is to add an amendment to our zoning code, which would allow the consideration and the use of parking stall demand reduction. So an applicant comes in, right out of the box, there's short parking. What can I do? Well, I can go to the ZBA, or I can pay for parking, or I can offer to the planning board parking stall demand reduction techniques, or maybe even the ZBA would have the authority to condition an approval if an applicant did some of these things and they would get their variance for parking. So this is the thinking that we have, because every development project that comes to the village in the C2 or the C1 is short parking. Some of them 1 or 2, some of them 13, 14, some of them, if the gap comes in, have no idea what that parking requirement is going to be, but it's going to be huge. And we have no way to deal with it other than the pileup, which could turn projects away if they start to get very costly.
Because of purchasing spots.
Well, doggy daycare. I'm sorry, Earth Dog, proper name. That was a prohibitive amount of parking spaces that they were going to pay. They were probably the first developer that balked at pileup. So they said, what do we do? The village attorney said, well, you can go and get them varied. You can get relief from the Zoning Board of Appeals. What metrics would the Zoning Board of Appeals use to grant relief from the parking if you chose to grant it?
The question I have, right, is could we grant relief without this being codified?
I don't know. We'll have to talk to our planning and zoning board attorney to see if you have.
You're
that
saying if there
ability.
was no model code to establish
stands right now.
as it
Right, so
did.
let's say they came to us now and they said, hey, we
Right.
we need 15 spots, but we only have 3, right? But we plan on doing these 5 things to reduce parking demand. Can you give us a variance? Could we grant a variance just
Yes.
based upon the mitigation strategies
Sure,
they're providing us, or does
Yeah,
it need to
we've
be
done it
codified?
of course.
Yeah, but
We've done it
they
before.
don't even have to, they come in, they need 15, they only have 5.
Yep.
They don't even have to offer mitigation, and most of them do, but they don't even have to, they can just say, it's a great place, can you give me a variance, and the board can say yay or nay.
But then you're opening yourself up, though.
Well, that's it, then that takes us into another, but I'm
That's
just
what I
saying,
mean, it's like-
as of right now,
Yes.
you walk in and say, I want a variance for 10 spots, theoretically, we could say, we'll give you the variance. I think what Andy's saying is that
How to sell
under
it.
this code, let's get something back. Instead of saying
Instead of just giving them the
Giving-
variance.
You
right,
can stand on a concept
right,
that they,
let's have them do something, whether
They
it's
made the
parking
record.
demand reduction, because the pileup does you no good. That's always been the argument about the pileup from day one, is that the idea behind pileup is, or was, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, was that they pay, I'm just saying, $5,000 a spot. They're short 10 spots, they give us $50,000. The idea behind that 50,000 is now to go buy a piece of property or
And build a parking
to build a
garage.
we don't, or not a parking or parking
But
lot
it
or
was
something.
It was also implemented prior to the cluster housing or multi-unit development boom that we are experiencing. now.
Yes. Yes.
So do we know what year the pileup was implemented? Do we have any idea about that?
I could tell you when it was implemented. I don't know. The last time the board set the values of the
Right.
pileup wasn't that long
Right.
ago.
yeah, setting the, adjusting the values.
Right.
Was something else, but when was it actually created?
Yeah,
It
I don't know
was
exactly.
when-
Probably back in the late 90s.
But I mean, couldn't you just have like, tell the
Right.
builders when they're building these apartments, you have to build the parking lots like they did before? The fact that they could use that space and make more money for themselves isn't of concern.
I'm just,
You-
how they built them before, what do you mean?
Like like the ones that are up there now have Jimmy Tunis's building has parking for
Right.
all of his apartments. The one that went up by the train station has parking. So why can't you just say, well, if you're gonna build these things, you need to have some
Technically,
parking?
the parking doesn't match the yield of units that were there, and they utilized the pilot program, and what we're seeing
But-
is that overflow problem.
In my
But I get
experience,
that, but I don't think the answer to that is say, okay, well, let's let you build up even higher, assuming that there won't be as many cars, because everybody's gonna work there. That doesn't
I
make
don't
any
think
sense.
I don't think that was suggested at all. What I think is being suggested is an additional program offering to maybe incentivize the occupants to instead of paying for parking, that they agree that they will be a one vehicle household, or they are gonna utilize the transportation. It's adding extra methods, not saying if you take these methods, we're gonna give you another.
so
There
you're
was
both
part of
right
it.
though. You're
There was
both right
part of
though,
it.
because what incentivizes a developer to even go through the trouble of
Just getting more
running
space
these
back.
programs? The developer himself also needs to be incentivized. Frankly, uptown, I don't think they'll need, what happens uptown, because you have mixed use buildings, is that the residential component is usually taken care of by a parking garage. They can dig down and they can put the residential requirement underneath the building, but you can't have customers park in that garage. So they need surface parking, and that's where the retail component or the commercial component torpedoes the project, because they can't find the surface area to provide the parking for the customers that are coming. So how do we do that? The two projects that are up there that have the underground parking, there's not much we can do, because when the residents vacate those spaces,
During the day, whether at work. but
nobody
go
can
in-
park in those spaces.
Why not?
Insurance, however the buildings are designed, they're not going to let the public go into the parking garages the way I understand
You
it.
have access to go up into the building, there's all kinds of.
Right, so
No,
there's
no,
security,
Jimmy
things like that.
Tunis is locked downstairs. You cannot get upstairs without
Right.
a key or a code.
Right.
So the people who come in and park to go shopping uptown won't have the key or code to go up, but they could.
But there may
use
not
that
be
parking
access,
during the
right,
day.
as it stands right now, not saying new develop, but like the one that was just built, that may not have access to those, you may have to pull in, walk all the way out the back of it to walk all the way
So the
around.
reality is 70% of retail spaces fail when there is not front of the facility parking. So that's why we run into so many problems with filling some of our spaces here when we have prospective tenants who come to take a look, like grocery stores at the vacated Gap property, or the Conifer One that's up there right now. What they are having problems with when we bring the prospective tenants into those spaces is they are not having the parking yield that needs to be there for the convenience factor. Therefore, they know that their business model will not be successful, because it's statistically already been proven by other businesses that if they don't have that immediate parking access, the businesses fail.
They're not
People
gonna
want to
have
pull
it
up,
anyway.
utilize, and go.
They're not gonna have it anyway. If you allow these things, these.
No,
that we're
station
talking about
station
are not gonna
crossing.
Allow you to have extra spots for those businesses anyway. There's 10 spots along in front of, say,
But let's,
Tower.
let me ask another question. We go and do this, Andy, one of the problems that we have in this village is not the people living in the village. What about all the you have all these businesses, i.e. restaurants, that people come down to see or use, hopefully, but it's the truth. You said it. In the summer, you can't find a place to, if you're a resident, unless
During
you
the
park.
day, yeah.
Right, you can't find a place to park. How does that solve the village's parking problem? Is that
Because
one of-
every business can implement parking stall demand reduction techniques, and number one, get customers that come in not by car, and number two, get their employees away from the valuable consumer parking spots, if you will.
Didn't Danfords try that?
Well,
It failed and.
Let me pause you on
We had
that.
those
As somebody who sits on the parking committee and who is going through that with the bid district at this time. In this past season, they did implement that, where they did make it so that the employees could no longer park in the immediate area and vicinity of the businesses, that they had to park in distant areas. And actually what we found is the program worked, that there were the opening of spots, there was a greater turnover. There is
But how did you incentivize that? How did you get the employees to do that?
the employees realize it's gonna benefit their business, their
Okay.
profit margin.
Okay.
It was self-implemented by the bid because they realized that increased their profit margin. We didn't have to incentivize them, the money was there.
Okay.
And the employees eventually found the incentivization through, in specifically the restaurants, because the higher turnover of
More
the
tables.
Right.
became more
Right.
money, right?
Right. How do you make money?
40
Right.
bucks a table, all of a sudden they were realizing the money was rolling, and it worked and it was beneficial. The village right now is making plans with altering timing and accessibility in certain areas to make it so that there's a greater turnover and that there isn't these park my car, leave it there for 8 and 12 hours situation. Specifically in the downtown area, in the, what we'll refer to as the northern section of the commercial district, not so much the upper quarter, the south district, is that we have residents in apartments that are parking their cars and leaving their vehicles, which makes it, there's not as much use for people who don't live in the downtown area to come utilize the retail spaces, the restaurants, and then go again. So we're trying to reformat some of the areas and remap some of the areas as far as what can be utilized for these residents to make the spaces open. So we're trying to work with what we have. What I think this proposal is to trying to figure out what else we could add to the table to maybe mitigate some of these problems, specifically for the areas that are to be developed around our metropolitan transportation hub of the upper port area, the South Commercial District, and what we can do to mitigate the problems there so we don't have a repeat of what we're seeing on the north end. Am I?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It could,
Hey,
look, parking
but it
stall
works.
demand reduction could
Anything-
reduce the
anything
cost
to-
of development.
anything to help
If you
this.
could reduce the number of parking spaces you need for your residents, you don't have to dig as much underneath your building.
Exactly.
That saves costs.
And then if you reduce the cost, we're gonna get more developers in to hopefully revitalize that area instead of it being not cost effective right now to build anything there because it's.
So there's never one
We'll
solution
also
to any problem.
incentivize our
There's
politicians
multiple
to
solutions.
electrify the line, to create cleaned up buses that maybe people are more inclined to utilize public transportation because it's super clean and offers air conditioning and whatever the opportunity might be. So then maybe the younger demographic will come in, okay, maybe it's not the 30-somethings or the 40-somethings, but the 20-somethings who are gonna be graduating in the next 10 years, who these plans will be servicing, might be more inclined to be a one or non-vehicle household if we provide them cleaner, easier modes of transportation and incentives.
Most of those getting out of college are going to be roommates. They're not married yet, so they can't afford the apartment. So it's two girls or two guys living together, sharing an apartment, working separately, different hours, both needing a car to do what they want to do.
Then they wouldn't buy, necessarily, they
And
wouldn't
they're
buy in
ones
the
going
downtown.
apartment. They're the ones going in the apartments. Once they get married and have children, now they want affordable housing, which is not here. There's plenty of very expensive apartments that need to be split because they can't afford the rent. Getting out of college, if you're single, you need the two incomes. So there's roommates living together, both doing their own thing. And when they get old enough to have a child and get married, they want affordable housing, not these apartments that are going up crazy.
Then they would move out of that apartment. But let me just change your hypothetical scenario where one of those two people works at Stony Brook University, or one of those people works in Manhattan. They don't need that car to get to work.
But with all those hundreds of people,
But by
that
increasing
the
the
fact that one of them
opportunity.
works at the
But by
Well, that's why we want to
increasing the
incentivize.
opportunity, maybe we increase those numbers of people. That's what the idea is. And so listen, we're talking the C1 district, right? I would love to see, we have a very high elder demographic. They're staying in their homes longer, right? We're creating these other opportunities. But a lot of those people may be inclined to move out of their houses if we cleaned up certain areas. We created affordable housing for them to move into, and we would find that older demographic move into these apartments where they could walk to dinner, they could walk to the dry cleaner, and these older demographics would be 2-vehicle homes would now become 1 vehicle in their apartment in the south side of Port Jeff. And the couple that, or this university students that have graduated and now 2 roommates, and now they're married, are gonna move into that older demographics home.
That's the
She's
thing.
not gonna wait for me to get out.
But so we are seeing that, and from a realtor perspective, we are seeing that. We are seeing that eventually, when they finally decide to sell, because we are living longer, we are more agile at a later point in life, therefore we're staying in the homes. Well, some of them are, and you'd be surprised, up
coming
until
back.
recently, when the city took a turn, the amount of clients that I had going into the city rather than staying here pre-COVID, I had substantial amount of clients, significant homeowners in Belterre and different people selling 8,000 square foot houses on 2 acres, and they were going to their apartment and that they had in the city because doctors were readily available, restaurants, healthcare, activities were right there within a short walking distance, and they could have that. And they were going to 1 vehicle minus the 3 that they had here and 4 in their 3 and 4 car garages. COVID hit, things changed a little bit, but I believe we're going to probably rotate back to that in the next decade or so.
Just one more little tidbit. Since COVID, since you brought COVID, 40% of all the office space has shrunk and gone away. It's not coming back. People are working from home. They don't need a car to get to work. So that's 40% of the office market out there. People don't go out shopping,
I was
and
raised in the village. I couldn't tell.
people don't go out shopping either. Everything is done by help me, internet shopping, Amazon and internet.
Smith Haven Mall has lost all of its anchors, and it's become a medical hub, and
Yeah.
it's become all these different things.
Not
It's
really
no
either.
longer.
So people are just gonna sit in their house, not doing
They're doing it now.
anything.
This is what they're doing, Tracy. This is what they're doing now. This is the new generation. That's it.
Well, they won't. If we incentivize them to have less cars, they'll be walking.
They'll be walking more.
The 80-year-olds who are in those apartments.
So, Mr. Chairman,
up and down the day.
that's all I have, but I do have this document.
Hold on, guys, let Danny.
That's all I have. I do have this document, and I have to admit that in the 5 years that this has been floating around out there, it really hasn't been tested much. Okay, I had a couple of interns do a mathematical analysis on a regression analysis on how many of these things can we throw out a project before it plateaus and we keep hitting the same guy. He's bussing and going back to work, then he takes his bike out to go do grocery shopping, he comes back, takes a shower, he's using the motion message machine. How many times can we hit the same person with these things? So it turns out that you could, I forget the exact number, but I think it was like 8 of these things combined would give you the maximum amount of parking stall demand reduction, and that's not too bad.
Can I just have you update and your terminology that you might end up being more successful? Instead of discussing bicycle, talk electric scooter.
Nah, they burn things down. I don't want to talk about them.
I
But
appreciate what your thought is, but drive up 25A and tell me how many
Yeah, I know.
electric scooters are you seeing whip up and down 25A, parked outside of Stop and Shop? How many of these people are on them riding, going wherever? You guys, how many do you see in the morning taking kids to
Yeah, all
school?
the time.
well, that's a good point. That's
There's people who take their kids to school on the scooters.
a point well taken.
So far,
They're still doing it now. I mean, like not today specifically.
Because we live by code. We need a micro mobility code that keeps these things off of sidewalks, in bike lanes, maybe even in their own micro mobility lane. Because I could tell you, when you walk out of a restaurant, and you step onto the sidewalk and you look and you see a bike coming, you're not thinking it's an electric bike. And then you take that next step, and then now you have a collision with a bicycle
When's the last
because
time
it's
you were in
zipping down.
Amsterdam?
I don't go to Amsterdam that much.
Take your life into your hands
Right.
when you step off the
That's
curb.
right. So there are micromobility ordinances now, and when you do road diets and things like that, now they're adding another lane. So you got a sidewalk, you got a bike lane, and now you've got this e-bike lane.
look,
So that we can walk somewhere.
there's 125 parking spots on the ferry. It sits there for 10 seconds.
So what's the next steps on this?
So the next step is if you guys want to read this, comment on it, let me know. I'm going to speak with our village attorney and see what we need to do in order to give the boards the tools to use this. But I do need to get it to the Board of Trustees and get their support on it as well.
What kind of timeline are you looking at?
There is no time.
On time.
It's a project of love. What do you call those?
Passion project.
So,
A passion project, right?
All right. Anybody have any other further questions or comments for tonight's meeting?
No.
All
Yeah,
right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did you have anything? Cindy, are we up to date on all housekeeping?
All up to date. We're good.
You can close the hearing.